Hello everyone, Professor Quizlook here. So we made a video just kind of walking through what a public policy analysis paper might look like. And I can give some examples, share some examples. The big takeaway is, though, they don't all look the same. There's not just one template to follow because there's a few different reasons. One is who you are writing for. Though if you're doing it for your employer, they probably want it in a certain way. Maybe it depends from professor to professor if you're doing it in school. So for me, the big takeaway is to just make sure you're following along with the keys that we have outlined in the syllabus, the pieces of it that I would like you to include in the syllabus, the pieces that I talked about in my previous video. But the big takeaway is they don't all have to look the same. The main takeaway is that you have the certain components that you're outlining why there's a problem that public policy is designed to address. And then the other components that you can bring in about who are the stakeholders, who holds the power when it comes to that public policy. Is it an economic issue? Is it an environmental issue? So lots of different pieces come together. But the takeaway there is that they don't all have to look the same. Not every public policy paper has to look the same. That does open up the question, though, what are some good topics that students can write on? And so that's, I like to give students a ton of leeway to write on whatever they find interesting. I don't like to tell you, oh, you have to write on these things, because students come to a political science course, an international relations, international affairs course, an American government course with their own, their own things that they already like. So with that said, I did want to talk about maybe some suggestions, some things that will tie in with some of our readings for the semester, with the course, as well as things we hear in the news, mixed with some of the issues that students have already brought up to me in the first couple weeks of class. When I asked the class, what kind of issues do you like? Well, these are some things people brought up. So a big one that we'll be reading about and people brought up is trade policy. Trade policy is absolutely something that's in the news every day. You can't avoid it. And so maybe that's something you have an interest in. So maybe you want to look at trade policy. Well, okay, let's open that up and think of some topics that could fit in there. Maybe you want to evaluate U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum, something that was big during the first Trump administration and now is pretty big here in the second Trump administration. So we don't want to just talk about tariffs. Are tariffs good or bad? Well, that's pretty broad. But instead, maybe let's narrow it down. So maybe on aluminum or on steel, evaluating U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum, steel or aluminum. Maybe you want to break that down further. Have they protected American industries without harming consumers? Something that we are hearing a lot about in the news, like the impact of tariffs. So have they protected American industries? You can find evidence. So we talked about in the video how to write a quality paper, you're bringing in evidence. It's not just, well, I think tariffs are good or I think tariffs are bad. Well, let's actually bring some evaluation, some data, and maybe if it's something that's happening today, maybe you'll have a hard time pulling in data. But you can find historical data. Okay, how during the first Trump administration, or even during the Biden administration, what did those policies look like? What kind of data was coming out that showed, were consumers hurt? Were industries hurt? Maybe some industries were protected, some industries were hurt. Or maybe you want to look at like student loan forgiveness, something else that's big in the news. Gig economy is another thing that people might be interested in. No one really brought it up when we were in class talking about it, but should Uber, Lyft drivers be classified as employees or independent contractors? And then what are the policy ramifications and what are the policy implications of that? So maybe you're interested in that and you want to write a policy analysis. Okay, California handles this differently than other places. Colorado, I'm sure, handles it differently than New York. So do you want to look at gig economy? Do you want to evaluate student loan forgiveness? Then there's social policies that maybe you want to write on. Things like universal pre-K. What else is in the news? Paid family leave. We know that states handle this differently. We saw from the reading the importance of federalism when it comes to public policy. We know states handle these policies quite differently. Something that the Trump administration has in the news right now is cash bail reform. So maybe you want to think about, okay, does eliminating cash bail improve fairness in the justice system without compromising public safety? Pretty good question to think about if you're into cash bail reform. Maybe you've never heard of that and it's not something that really interests you, but maybe in a class of our size, someone in the class spent some time. Remember, you write on what you want. I'm just trying to give some ideas. Healthcare. Couple times that we talked about public policy in this class, people brought up healthcare. So absolutely seems to be something that people are interested in. Different types of healthcare system. Is it cheaper with this system or that system? What's the service look like? Is there a wait time? What are the pros and the cons of having private health insurance versus more socialized healthcare system? So lots of different ways to look at public policy within healthcare. Something else I think Aiden brought up in class was environmental policy, different ways to handle environmental issues. I know some of you have had for American government. And in that class, I remember people talking about plastic bag bans. So you could ask a question like, do bans or taxes on single-use plastics reduce waste without disproportionately burdening consumers? Something like that. Or whether the impacts are there environmental impacts of banning plastic bags. So again, that seems something pretty simple that we deal with, but a paper like that could be kind of interesting. Okay, what are the economic ramifications? What are the consumer ramifications on that? Lots and lots of different issues. I know some students in here, criminal justice. So you could do something criminal justice, maybe related to like marijuana legalization. We know, again, this federalism issue where some states handle it this way, others handle it this way, and others handle it this way. So maybe you want a public policy analysis looking at marijuana legalization. Maybe you can look at the economic, the social, the public safety impacts of where it's been legalized in a state like Colorado versus a state where it hasn't, like South Dakota. So you could write on technology and privacy, a huge issue. Yesterday, the Trump administration had quite a grouping of technology CEOs and really the heavy hitters in the technology industry at the White House. So maybe you want to write about something about technology and data. Maybe you want to think about the water usage of AI or the environmental impacts of AI. So what you're starting to notice here is there are lots and lots of different public policies that you can think of across the board, something that you're interested in, a topic you're interested in, and then within that, we just want to be specific, not just like healthcare, not just the technology, but maybe like Medicaid expansion under the ACA or water usage under the growth of ChatGPT or something like that. And so we just want to make sure that, one, you find something interesting you write about, because I want you to write about something that you like, because then it's less tedious and less painful to write the paper, and you actually get something out of it. You actually learn more about something that you're already interested in. And when we create our questions, our research itself, we want to make sure that we're doing it specific enough that's not just, again, healthcare. Well, that's pretty broad. It's going to be hard to have a question, but instead narrow that down a bit. We know that pretty much anything that we brought up in class, there are active debates, multiple stakeholders involved, so that you can bring those in and think about who is all involved in this public policy. We saw in my other video I created and from the reading this week that in all of these public policies, there are many, many people involved, stakeholders, interest groups, parties, agencies, individuals. And of course, they invite evaluation of trade-offs, efficiency versus equality, liberty versus security. Again, and maybe you're criminal justice and you want to write on a big hot topic like right now, National Guard members in Washington, D.C. Does that create more security, but does that roll back on liberties some if you have stop and frisk policies versus not having them, or what was Giuliani's broken window policing policies? Well, maybe you create more security there, but at what cost? What cost to liberties? So we'll continue to think about these issues throughout the semester. Like I said in class and then in the previous video, our readings now kind of shift to more applied public policy, but our readings thus far hopefully have helped you structure a way to think about and look at public policy analysis, and we'll of course keep returning to this throughout the semester. Thank you.